Good morning, everyone. Oh, we got our little fuzzy thing back here. It was missing for a little while. Somebody brought us a new little fuzzy. So maybe I'll sound better. I don't know. Oh, welcome to White River Buddhist Temple. Let's see, today is April 7th, I think. And so it's the date of our monthly memorial service. So we will do things, we've changed things since the beginning of the year. So just as a reminder, the Sensei will read all the names first, and then during the Jusei-Gei, people may come up and make their offerings. We seem to think that sort of streamlines things a bit. So we will start with Sambujo, which you'll find on page 22 of your purple service book. Thank you.
Can I ask that everyone please put your hands together in Gassho or bow your head in contemplation and respect? As we say together, Namo Amida Butsu, I take refuge in Amida Buddha. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Knots, Namo Knots, Namo Knots, Namo. are gathered here today in observance of the White River Buddhist Temple's monthly Shotsuki service to remember those who have passed away in the month of April. They are Richard William Arima, Reiko Yamamoto, Dennis Tanaka, Barbara Kimiko Tsuji, Kenzo Kinoshita, Frank Masaru Arima, George Akio Taketa, Frank Senji Natsuhara, Misao Tsukamaki, Boy Fujisawa Bingo, Fujie Yabusaki, Tetsuo Yanagawa, Kaoru Yanagawa, Sherry Watanabe, Goro Kinoshita, and Kerry Taniguchi, as well as all others who were not listed but contributed to the temple and its community. May the fragrance of the incense teach us the purity of our intention. May the beauty of the flowers offered teach us of life's impermanence. May the light that burns brightly teach us of Amida's great wisdom and compassion. Please repeat, Namo Amida Butsu, I take refuge in Buddha with me. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Nops, Namo Nops, Namo Nops, Namo Nops.
싱하는
Can I ask that everyone please once more put your hands together in gosho or bow your head in contemplation and reflection. As we say together once again, Nam Myoho Butsu, I take refuge in Amida Buddha. Nam Myoho Butsu. 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 Nam Myoho.
For those of you who are able, please rise, and we will read the three treasures you'll find on page 3. And stay standing if you may. We have a song or gatha called In a Quiet Valley. That's on page 119, but I'll repeat the page number again later on. So, page 3 in the Purple Service Book. Three treasures. Fortunate is it to be born into human life. Now we are living it. Rare is it to encounter the teachings of the Buddha. Now we hear it. If we do not seek the truth of the Dharma in this life, in what life shall we find it? Let us reverently take refuge in the three treasures of the truth. I take refuge in Buddha. May we all together absorb into ourselves the principle of the way to enlightenment and awaken within us our highest aspiration. I take refuge in Dharma. May we all together be submerged in the depth of the Dharma and gain wisdom as deep as the ocean. I take refuge in Sangha. May we all together become units in true accord in a life of harmony in the spirit of universal brotherhood, freed from the bondage of selfishness. Even through ages of myriads of kalpas, hard is it to hear such an excellent, profound, and wonderful teaching. Now we're able to hear and receive it. Let us thoroughly understand the true meaning of Tathagata's teaching. Namo Buddhaya. Now we will have a gatha or song. It's called In a Quiet Valley. It's on page 119 of your service book. Works better this way. Thank you. Please be seated. And now we will have a Dharma message from Reverend Cindy.
Can I ask that everyone please put your hands together in gosho or bow your head in contemplation and respect as I read these words from Shakyamuni Buddha from the Amida Sutra. There are lotus flowers, as large as chariot wheels, growing in the pools. Those of blue color emit blue radiance. Those of yellow color emit yellow radiance. Those of red color emit red radiance. And those of white color emit white radiance. They are exquisite, wonderful, fragrant, and pure. Sariputra, the land of perfect bliss, is filled with such splendor and adornments. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Nuts. Namo Nuts. Well, hello, everyone. I hope you all are doing well. Today, we are gathered here today not only to listen to a wonderful speaker later on, so I don't matter, apparently, to some people. But anyways, we are here for the service to observe our monthly memorial service, our monthly Shotsuki service, in which we are remembering all of those who have passed away in the month of April. And so, a tradition of Jodo Shinshu Buddhism is to read the Amida Sutra, the smaller sutra, during these memorial service times. And since it's okay that we don't chant Amida Kyo, but I thought it would be interesting to go through the sutra with you all and to think about what it says. And so last time, Shakyamuni Buddha, who is the person telling this story, to his disciple, Sariputra, telling Sariputra about Amida Buddha's Pure Land, right? The land of perfect bliss. Amida Buddha is, again, the Buddha of immeasurable light and infinite life, the Buddha of infinite compassion, life, and wisdom, light. And because we have no idea what Amida Buddha's Pure Land looks like, Shakyamuni Buddha, the Buddha who was born in India 2,500 years ago, whose birthday we're going to celebrate next week, whose birthday is technically tomorrow, tells us in this sutra, describes it as much as possible so that we human beings can understand. And so we are on this part on the lotus flowers. So there are pools of water, right, in the Pure Land that is lined with 7 kinds of jewels, has pavilions on the shores that are made of those 7 kinds of jewels. And within these pools are lotus flowers that are the size of chariot wheels. Size of chariot wheels. So as someone like me, as I told you, I have aphantasia. I'm not able to imagine in my mind. So this is sort of how my mind works, right? Not all together, but this is kind of how it works, right? I go lotus flower plus chariot wheel. And then it goes on saying that, right, there's blue ones, there's red ones, there's yellow ones, there's white ones, and they each grow their respective color, right? And so I try my best in my mind to imagine a lotus wheel that size. It's hard, honestly. It's really hard. Partially also because I've never seen a chariot wheel glow. So that might be, for me, right? I could imagine it. I could picture it in my mind. But I need something physical to think about. And so this part of the Amida Sutra, this part about the lotus flowers, about how it's big as a chariot wheel and its different colors, and how they radiate those colors, actually came to me a few months ago. So a few months ago was Christmas, And for Christmas, my husband, Reverend Koyama, and I decided to give each other, I guess, Christmas presents. And that Christmas present was to invite our immediate families with us to Disneyland and Disney's California Adventure. Right? My family is from Southern California, so we were going down there anyways to see my side of the family. So Koyama Sensei goes, "Why don't we go to Disneyland?" I'm like, sure. The whole point of us going down for Christmas was to see my side of the family, but still, Disneyland is always a good plus. And so one of those nights, we decided to attend an event, which is available to everyone. Of course, you have to get tickets that day. But we went to Disney's California Adventure that day, and we decided to stay and watch the Wonderful World of Color, which is their nighttime spectacular over at California Adventure, which uses lights and water, right? So they would shoot up these jets of water with lights underneath it, as well as have, I guess, a fan of water, I guess you could describe it like. I don't know how to describe it, but in which they project images on it. And it's Disney, so it's all these different characters from different Disney movies. And since that week was Christmas and New Year's, right, it was holiday themed. So it was very nice. But of course, the hardest part about this event is the wait before, right? You have to wait in line to get ready to go into where you get to stand. And yeah, it's a place where you have to stand. But then you have to go there like half an hour early, right, to get your nice spots and everything. Disneyland is all about waiting. Disneyland and Disney's California Adventure is all about waiting. And while we were waiting there, we got actually the front row seats, which is a little bit the best, but also a little bit of the worst, because you get the water that comes blown towards you. So we got a little wet that night, but it wasn't bad. Again, it's not as cold as up here. I do have to say that. And while we were waiting for the show to start, I was sitting there looking around me, and this part of the Miri Sutra came to me. This part about the chariot wheels and the lights, the flowers that glow these different lights. And it was all because of these. And these are my own pictures. This was pictures of the Ferris wheel, right? The Ferris wheel. And like, we had a nice spot in that we could see the Ferris wheel and everything. We were in the very front row. But as I was looking at this Ferris wheel, I was reminded of this part of the Miri Sutra. How, well, the lotus flowers aren't as big as a Ferris wheel. It's plus, at that time, I don't think they knew what a Ferris wheel was 2,500 years ago. But thinking of this wheel, right, of a wheel that glows. What also got me was the reflection in the water that shows those same colors glowing. And I couldn't help but think about this particular part of the Amida Sutra, right? And I could read you that part again. As you continue to look at my wonderful pictures. So, there are lotus flowers as large as chariot wheels growing in the pools. Those of blue color emit blue radiance. Those of yellow color emit yellow radiance. Those of red color emit red radiance. Those of white color emit white radiance. I feel like that's exactly what was happening at that time. And yeah, you can make the leap that Disneyland is in a way this world's Pure Land. I don't know, I went there a little too frequently, so it's not really a Pure Land anymore for me. but, right? There's still the want of me to be in this spot that looks exactly like this. Right? Every single day, every single minute, every single second, I want to be in a place like this. And so it is wonderful to know that in Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, those who pass are born in Amida Buddha's Pure Land, which has the lotus flowers. Right? The lotus flowers that are as big as chariot wheels and glow wonderful colors. But it's also important to know that though they go to this land, they immediately come back just to be with us. They have this wonderful Pure Land, Amida Buddha's Pure Land, that they're able to go to. But instead of going to that wonderful land and staying there, they come back to be with us and help guide us. How wonderful is that? They chose us over staying in a land where they can see such imagery. And that is the reason why I continue to say, Namo Amida Butsu, I take refuge in Amida Buddha, because it is understood that it is Amida Buddha's infinite wisdom and compassion which allows our loved ones to continue to be with us, right, as Buddhas today. How wonderful is it that they will continue to be with us? They will continue to guide us through our lives. Ooh. Did I go back? There we go. And so it's a wonderful thing that eventually, right? Eventually we will be able to see this Pure Land, to witness this Pure Land. But it's wonderful knowing that our loved ones, knowing this wonderful sight, come back to us. Through Namo Amida Butsu, I take refuge in Amida Buddha. So every time, like today, that we think on our loved ones who have passed, we think in gratitude to their infinite wisdom and compassion, and say Namo Amida Butsu with them. So in closing, can I have us please put our hands together in Gasho, or bow your head in contemplation and respect, as we say together, Namo Amida Butsu, I take refuge in Amida Buddha. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida. Namo not. Namo not. Namo not.
fuzzy friend jumped off. Oh, I'll do that later. Assault your ears with something that probably doesn't come from the pure light. Noises like that. Thank you for your message, Reverend Cindy. Now, if you are able, please rise. We will sing a song or gatha called Ondoksan 2. You'll find that on page 155. And then please remain standing for the reading of the daily Creed of Jodo Shinshu. So, sorry? 153. What did I say? Page 8, Daily Creed of Jodo Shinshu. Please read with me. Realizing enlightenment is assured and recited in Nembutsu, I shall live my life cheerfully and positively, understanding the oneness of life and cultivating self-reflection. I shall diligently attend to my life's tasks in gratitude. Recognizing the Dharma path, I shall help spread the teachings of the Buddha. Appreciating the Buddha Dharma, I shall respect and help others, working for the good of society. Namo Buddhas, Namo Buddhas, Namo Buddhas, Namo Buddhas. Thank you. You may be seated. Do we have any guests today that would like to be recognized? Okay. So now we have announcements. Of course, you've heard Sensei, we will have a speaker following service, so everyone is welcome to stay for that.
Just reminding people we have an ABA Zoom meeting tomorrow, 1 p.m. If you want the link, just come to see me and I'll email you one. The other thing is that the ABA is sponsoring a field trip to the Seattle Asian Art Museum on Friday the 26th. We only have 20 spots available, so you need to sign up if you're interested. Thank you.
This is one last opportunity. As you can see, this sheet is pretty full, and this is for the volunteers who are helping with the BWAT next week. So everyone is invited to attend following services. However, if anybody would like to bring something and has not signed up for these tea sandwiches and salads and fruit, then please see me later on after we've had a wonderful talk by Miri Cypers, and we've had some appetizers. So thank you very much.
This may be, yes, this will be the last time I will be announcing the ordering of Takoma Buddhist Temple Sukiyaki, right? The deadline is this Saturday, April 13th, right? I believe so, if my math is correct. And so please, again, this is pre-order only, so if you do not pre-order, you will not be able to get a sukiyaki or chicken teriyaki meal if you didn't order it. So please order it by Saturday, April 13th. Again, the sukiyaki date is Sunday, April 21st. So you will be able to jet on over after Sunday service on April 21st. For the event on April 21st, there will be a dine-in option from 11 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. and a drive-through option from 2 to 4 p.m. And again, so please pre-order your sukiyaki meal or your chicken teriyaki meal by this Saturday, April 13th. And then I was going to announce, do we announce Hanamido decorating? Oh, it's on there. Okay. The Hanamido decorating will be this Saturday. So please feel free to come and join us create the Hanamido, which is I guess you could say altar, where we put the baby Buddha in for Sunday service. So please feel free to come out and help us build the Hanamido next Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you, Sensei, and everyone. So what Sensei was talking about is a little blue sheet that gives you information about the coming events. And, yep, Saturday, 10 a.m., Hanamido decorating. You don't need any experience. Just come on in. We need lots of hands because this altar is literally covered with flowers. It takes many people to put those flowers right in all the chicken wire that we have. So, but it's a lot of fun. You get to meet people, and you know, it's good to do things in a group. So, with that, we come to the close of our service. For those of you who wish, you may come up after service and make oshoku, or blessing, at our incense burner. It doesn't commit you to anything, because some people have this idea that it may change you, but it doesn't commit you to anything. You don't automatically become a Buddhist by doing that. It's just to show appreciation. So, our closing words are on our little program. If you'd read along with me. Thank you very much. My life is not only my life, but also the life of others. Sacrifice, kindness, thoughtfulness, and patience. I am grateful. Namo Idats, Namadabats, Namanda, Namanda, Namada. So, we will. Kendall, did you want to say anything? Oh, okay. Well, let Mr. Kendall.
Okay, this is not an announcement. So if you haven't gone on Shoko, we'll give you like 2 minutes to get all set up. But don't leave, okay? So, and then we'll go ahead and get started after that. So you have 2 minutes. Go. Okay, we're going to get started here, so folks can sit, have a seat. Everyone sit down. Por favor. Okay, we're going to get started. Let's have a seat. Let's have a seat. All right. Here we go. Good morning. So first of all, we are so pleased to be resuming our Community Connection Speaker Series today. It's the first time since the start of the pandemic, and this series is really an opportunity for our Sangha to hear from individuals in our community who are making an impact. It's also an opportunity to build connections and strengthen our bonds of friendship. And so that's why today is especially poignant as we have the wonderful guest speaker joining us. So today's speaker is Miri Cypers, the Regional Director of the ADL Pacific Northwest, an organization dedicated toward fighting hate and bigotry across Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and Alaska. It also happens to be the organization that I work for. Miri has a long-standing commitment to social justice and has worked almost a decade in government and for progressive advocacy organizations, over a decade actually. She previously served as Director of Federal Affairs and Partnerships at Giffords, the gun violence prevention organization founded by former Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords and her husband, Captain Mark Kelly. And before that, she served as the Director of Advocacy for Jewish Women International, where she worked on the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act and spearheaded young leadership programs. Miri is the mother of two wonderful children. She's also an award winner for the 40 Under 40 from the Puget Sound Business Journal. Beyond everything, Miri is a kind, smart, compassionate, hardworking, and courageous person. And most of all, she is a dedicated friend to our communities. So can everyone please give a round of applause and welcome to Miri.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I was joking with Kendall that this was such a meditative, beautiful service and experience, and now I'm here to pull everyone into the real world and share the grim realities of what we're seeing. If I can, I'm just going to poke this a little out so I can see the screen at the same time. But this was so beautiful. I go to synagogue, and I'm Jewish, so I feel like it actually felt very similar being in a place where, you're reading maybe a language that you don't maybe speak in everyday life as much as you do when you go to your house of worship. And I just saw a lot of, symbols and similarities to what I would experience at a service. So it felt very comforting and at home. I'm Miri Cypers. I have the honor of serving as a regional director for the Anti-Defamation League in the Pacific Northwest. And as you might know, ADL is one of the legacy civil rights organizations that was founded in the early 1900s. We have a powerful integrated mission that remains the same today as it was back then, which is to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and secure fair and just treatment to all. And at a time where anti-Semitism in the early 1900s was really quite rampant and virulent and pervaded many aspects of everyday life and was systemic, I think it's really beautiful that the founders of the organization felt that, we need to be in community with other people. And if we as marginalized people are not fighting for the safety of others, we're not going to have an equitable and just and harmonious society. So that mission really motivates our local team and my colleagues across the United States today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the context and the landscape that we find ourselves in today, I'll tell you a little bit specifically about anti-Semitism because that is an area of focus and expertise for our organization. And I'll also try to uplift you and inspire you to tell you a little bit more about what are some of the solutions that we put forth to this problem, and hopefully some ways that you can also consider getting involved as well and taking action. Unfortunately, we find ourselves today in a time where our democracy is in peril and the safety of many marginalized and vulnerable communities are not in the place that we want them to be. According to the FBI, we have seen a rise in hate crimes for the past few years, starting in 2017. And we see hate crimes targeting a number of different communities. Most of them, the majority of them, each year are based on race, and we've also unfortunately seen a growth of crimes based on religious hate crimes and crimes targeting the LGBTQ plus community. In Washington State, I think sometimes there's a notion that we live in a bubble of safety, but unfortunately, that's really not true. And we've seen 590 documented hate crimes in the last report from the FBI. And we know that data is very limited because this captures things that rise to a level of a crime, but sometimes if somebody's walking through a parking lot and someone yells a racial slur, or you kind of experience something more like a microaggression or something a little bit more minor, that doesn't necessarily rise to the level of a crime. And there is also really rampant underreporting where people feel reluctance to contact law enforcement. Maybe they don't feel like they'll be seen or heard. Maybe they have a tenuous relationship, or they are fearful because of immigration status or language or cultural discrepancies. So there are a lot of reasons why people are also reluctant to report. So we know from these numbers that it's really only the tip of the iceberg. And one thing that we've been also noticing at ADL that is not going to be a surprise to anybody in this room who reads the news is, unfortunately, we're also in a climate where there's a lot of mainstreaming of white supremacy and extremism. We saw this on the right-hand side really rising to alarming levels on January 6th with the insurrection of the Capitol. But we also see at the bottom one of the trends that we've been noticing in the 5+ years at ADL through a Center on Extremism, which is a group of investigators and research analysts that we have, is that white supremacists and other extremists used to really stay in the in the dark web and certain quarters of the internet. But today they feel very comfortable because this kind of, conspiracy theories, disinformation, misinformation, etc., has become so normalized and accepted that they're really out and they're much more emboldened than they used to be. And on the bottom is, a series of propaganda that they often spread in communities or near schools or on college campuses for purposes of recruitment to incite people's curiosity. And this was found in Kirkland, and we have many other examples about how these kinds of things are happening right here in the Puget Sound, in Renton and Newcastle, and places that I think we believe to be very safe. But the truth is that extremism is truly among us, and it's a growing problem in society. And at ADL, one of the particular areas that we also closely track is not just hate crimes or extremism targeting all groups, but specifically anti-Semitic incidents. Many people in the Jewish community feel comfort reporting to us. And one of the things that we noticed in the late 1970s was that there were very few civil society organizations that were actually intaking reports of hate or bias or prejudice, and we didn't really have laws that actually recognized them in our states or nationally. So we've been actually intaking reports from constituents since 1979, not only supporting people when they have issues, but also aggregating the data, because we really do believe that sunlight is the best disinfectant. And if you're able to share with the public and with journalists the trends and issues that you're seeing arise year over year, you're more likely to be able to expose the problem, but also combat the problem. So unfortunately, what we've been seeing is that anti-Semitic incidents and crimes, which we categorize as vandalism, assault, and harassment, are unfortunately ballooning to record levels. And one of the things we know is that due to the conflict in the Middle East, it has consequences here at home. And I'll talk a little bit more about how we're seeing hate manifest in our own community. But that is something that is definitely problematic and growing here. I thought it might be helpful to maybe talk a little bit more about who are the Jewish people and Jewish identity before jumping into how anti-Semitism is manifesting here, because sometimes we don't fit into neat buckets or categories that we tend to use within American society when we talk about race or ethnic group. So I thought it might be helpful to kind of level set and provide you with some foundation in language so you can kind of understand some of the trends around anti-Semitism and hate that we're seeing. I think if you could take anything away from this presentation, I think one of the biggest stereotypes that exists around the Jewish people is that we're a white religious group. But the truth is, I want to counter that, because we're actually multiracial and multi-ethnic, and we are more than a religious group. So, many Jewish people, might go to synagogue or be, religiously observant, but there are certainly also people who might identify with being Jewish who don't, or who aren't religious, or who are an atheist. We also are, we have intersectional identities. You can be an Asian Jewish person, you can be a disabled Jewish person, you can be, a transgender Jewish person. So we, because of years of dispersion and migration, we also look very differently. One Jewish person is one Jewish person. And we also are tied to our ancestral homeland in the land of Israel. And since, about 2,000 years ago, we've been dispersed around the globe. So you'll have the Jewish community have many kinds of cultural or religious traditions, or even like food traditions that are very different based on the different places that we've been. We're also really a small people, and I think that's something that I wanted to share too. In the Puget Sound, we're about 65,000, 75,000 in Washington state total, but we're really only about 0.2% of the global population. So when you understand what it means to be a minority, we really, embrace that small peoplehood. And anti-Semitism itself, the way we define it at ADL, is the marginalization or oppression of people who are Jewish based on the belief in stereotypes, myths, disinformation about Jewish people, Judaism, Zionism, or Israel. And, as I said before, unfortunately, we are in a society where a lot of disinformation, misinformation is thriving, and this really is a vulnerable time for many marginalized groups, including the Jewish community. But there are also interesting things about anti-Semitism that might be similar or different to other forms of oppression. In one way, it punches up because it's a conspiracy theory that kind of says, people are powerful, they're privileged, they control this, they control that. But in other forms of racism, you often have punching down, where people are degrading, classic stereotypes or myths, like people are lazy, people are poor, people are uneducated. So you kind of have this weird combination where people are, punching up to kind of claim that a group is more powerful than it is, but at the same time punching down to say that people are, evil or subhuman. And, I think it's unfortunate, but normalized behavior becomes more normalized over time. But we do really try to have an attitude where we talk about impact over intent. Sometimes somebody's, intent was not necessarily to do something biased or prejudiced, but unfortunately sometimes the impact is so. So we do really try to be gracious and call in and do a lot of education to talk about how we can change the current climate. And as I mentioned before, we are a very old people. Anti-Semitism is one of the oldest forms of hate, and it isn't unique to any one geography. We're currently seeing a rise in anti-Semitism, not only in the United States, but really around the globe, impacting communities from, Argentina to Brazil to France. I'll talk a little bit more about the linear, not cyclical, and I have a graph that shows it very well. But one of the reasons I wanted to show this slide is because on the right, it actually shows all of the expulsions of the Jewish people from various places in Europe and the Middle East far before the Holocaust. So I think sometimes, there's an emphasis on the Holocaust, and rightly so, as the biggest, event for the Jewish people. But at the same time, these kinds of, histories of expulsion and movement was happening far before that. One of the things that I also wanted to make a point of is that I think one of the maybe most vulnerable places we are right now in society is how quickly prejudice can fester and grow in a short amount of time. And sometimes, we take for granted some of the progress we've made around acceptance or safety. But one of the things that ADL also does, in addition to collecting the actual incidents that happen to people related to hate, is we do research about attitudes and psychology to understand why people might be prone to certain forms of prejudice and how much prejudice there is in society today. And one of the things we've actually done at ADL is we've done the longest longitudinal prejudice reduction surveys in the United States. So since the 1960s, we've actually been surveying the American public to ask about their attitudes towards the Jewish people, to understand trends and how trends move over time, and how, acceptance of a certain community can ebb and flow. And what we actually found was, since the 1960s, anti-Semitic attitudes had really been plummeting to very low levels, and there have been, broad progress in terms of acceptance and inclusion. But in the 5 years since we did this study that we released in 2023 to 5 years prior, we actually saw that anti-Semitic attitudes more than doubled in the United States in a 5-year period. And what we also saw was that people who are more highly likely to be categorized as highly anti-Semitic, meaning they agree with, I think, 6 or 7 of the 13 tropes, so a majority of the tropes that we share with them and ask them about, they're also much more highly likely to engage in conspiratorial thinking, which is really interesting. And I don't mean to say that people who express bias or microaggressions or stereotypes are conspiracy theorists, but when it comes to people who are much more highly likely to have highly anti-Semitic views, there's a very high correlation between people who believe in conspiracy theories. And on the right, you also see a graph that's really interesting, because when we think of a lot of other racial or ethnic groups in the United States, or even, just the status of women, a lot of times we see one specific category, and over time, how acceptance slowly climbs and grows, and that beautiful line becomes, bigger and better over time. But unfortunately, what we've seen in the Jewish community is that even any kind of privilege, like educational or economic, and that kind of status hasn't necessarily prevented the Jewish people from experiencing systemic discrimination. So unlike other groups that, their status might, kind of wax and wane a little bit over time and hopefully make progress, the Jewish people have never really been able to withstand systemic discrimination, no matter how privileged they've been. So I kind of talk about this concept of privilege and vulnerability, that they can exist at the same time. And we really try to get people to not be binary thinkers. The idea that I can walk through the world as a white presenting person, and I have a lot of privilege based on certain factors in my life. And at the same time, I can be very vulnerable when I walk into a Jewish institution, when there are armed guards outside of my kids' preschool and Hebrew school and every single, religious service we attend, etc. So those two concepts can definitely be ever present at the same time. And I think it's really interesting and important to be able to hold those two truths. We've also unfortunately seen just such a rise in anti-Semitism in K through 12 schools. And I don't know if this is an apt comparison, Kendall, but I do feel like during the rise of anti-Asian hate during COVID, there were so many floods of reports of young people who were being bullied in schools because of their identity, because of kind of macro societal issues that related to conspiracy theories and xenophobia and othering and racism. And I think we're really seeing that too trickle down into schools right now at a very alarming rate. And I, included, it might be kind of small text for people, but just some examples of reports that we're getting from parents in Seattle and Bellevue and really all over Washington state, when the youngest generation is really bearing the brunt of growing prejudice. And I also just wanted to provide an example, unfortunately, from my own synagogue on Mercer Island that happened last November, where, there are just these conflations of what's happening in the Middle East with local Jewish communities, blaming, the tragic war that's unfolding right now between the Israelis and the Palestinians to local Jewish people and blaming them, for bloodshed and war. So it's a really unfortunate reality where, and it's complicated too, and I'm happy to answer any questions of that, but it is definitely something that we're seeing play out more as people have, strong political views about what's going on. Sometimes they use it, I don't want to say as an excuse, but as rationale to express anti-Jewish ideas or behaviors. But I think I just want to end on a positive note because I've shared with you a lot of unpleasantries this morning. But, you know, one of the tried and true formulas that ADL has always had throughout our 110 plus year history is the idea that there's no silver bullet to counter hate. These hate, bias, prejudice, etc., are societal ills that have existed for centuries, and it is sometimes some of the most normal ways of understanding the world is to other and differentiate. And we see that with little kids, even, you know, starting at 2 or 3 years old, they start to see the world through difference. But we really try to do at ADL is recognize that there's no one solution to these problems. We need a holistic and comprehensive and integrated approach to be able to make progress, and not to eliminate hate, but to push it back to the margins where it's no longer accepted and it's no longer festering and growing in troubling ways. So one of the most important pillars of our work is educating the next generation and really having a strong belief that just as, you know, bias is learned at a young age, it can also be unlearned, it can be challenged, but you have to have intentional strategies to do that. It's not going to appear out of thin air. So we work really closely with K through 12 schools. We have a particular initiative called No Place for Hate, which is a free program that schools can participate in during the school year. And the wonderful thing about it is it's student-led. So it's not necessarily administrators, you know, putting together the projects and saying these are the issues you have to come up with. Students themselves from different grade levels at different K through 12 schools are coming together with the support of adults and thinking about what are the biggest issues or challenges that they're facing, and what are different projects and actions that they want to take throughout the school year to have a safer climate for all students. So it's going to look really different depending on the age group in school. And ADL educators are there throughout every step of the way to help to guide them and provide resources and ideas. And at the end of the year, they get a really nice banner to acknowledge, you know, the progress that they've been making, and then they start again the next year. We also do a lot of anti-Semitism education for schools, for workplaces, and community settings. So, you know, if you're affiliated or have people in your life who go to K through 12 schools, we would love to chat with you about how to bring these programs. You know, if you're in a workplace where maybe you're doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work, and, you know, they have conversations about these issues, would welcome, you know, thinking about maybe how ADL can play a role in conversation. And then I also just encourage you to peruse our national education website, and I'm happy to follow up after, because we have really great resources that are free, like Books Matter, where we talk about, you know, different identities and groups and stories through books that are age appropriate. We have table talks so people can actually have conversations with their kids or their grandkids or younger people in their life, or adults, about different social issues, and it gives you some ideas about how to have complex or hard conversations. So I just wanted to put that out there because that is really a source of pride for us. And even though we've unfortunately been seeing a growth of bias, we've also been seeing a lot of people clamor for education and want to do more and want to take action. So we're really proud to be in over 54 schools right now in Washington and Oregon, and in, you know, working with millions of students across the United States. We also do a lot related to intergroup outreach, and it's been wonderful to host members of the White River Buddhist Temple at some of the efforts that we've been having. About 2 years ago, we established an Asian Jewish initiative with Kendall and with many community partners that's grown to have 15 organizations in the Puget Sound. You know, we host a lot of different programs around education and sharing culture. And I know many people in the Jewish community would love to come to something like this and learn, you know, more about their Buddhist friends and neighbors and their traditions, etc. So I think that's a really important piece of it. It's, you know, kind of being there for people when hard things happen, but also being there to just build community connections and relationships, which have really kind of fizzled out in the post-COVID world and even before that. So I think we just view that kind of everyday work of building up community and building relationships with people across difference as really integral to making the long-term change that we need to make. We also do a lot of education for law enforcement, just understanding that a lot of hate-related issues have a connection with our criminal justice system, but often law enforcement does not have the kind of education and skill set they need to, you know, arrive to a scene of a hate crime and be able to understand and ask the right questions and compassionately deal with different community members and maybe understand, you know, cultural or linguistic or, you know, differences that they need to understand. So we're the largest, non-governmental trainer of law enforcement in the United States. We provide different workshops to them at no cost around better addressing hate crimes, managing implicit bias, understanding the landscape of extremism and how it impacts vulnerable communities. So that kind of work is really important. And we also share day-to-day potential threats or trends with them. If we know, last year, I believe, we saw a very big uptick in swatting where people would, make false calls to say, there's a potential act of violence in a certain setting, and a SWAT team will often come in. So, sometimes if we have information where there was a Sikh Gurdwara in the area where we knew this was going to be happening because of intelligence we had through our analysts, and we shared with the Renton Police Department, this is going to be happening. We hope you can enter the situation with knowledge and discretion to not scare people who are worshiping in this setting, but to just kind of diffuse the situation and be mindful that this is not something that is necessarily a violent threat. So I think that kind of information and that kind of sensitivity is really, really important. We also really want to use all of the people who are reporting to us, that are talking to us about the challenges and issues in their communities, and all of the data that we have for good, and to create systemic change. So we were really proud to be working on some longer term issues around improving our hate crimes laws in Washington State. And a few weeks ago, Kendall and I were really honored to join with a lot of partners in the interfaith and from a variety of different communities to establish a statewide hate crimes hotline, and Governor Jay Inslee signed it into law. And the idea is that, we want strong laws to hold people accountable if they do commit an act of hate, but we also see the immediate need to support people with services in counseling and legal help and whatever kind of support they need if something happens to their business or their religious institution or their home. So we hope that it's a place that people can call 24/7 in the next couple of years as it gets established, and they can get the kind of services they need from a victim service provider. And then they can make the decision. If I want to report to law enforcement, I know how to do that. But it's something that I think will be a really big bridge to the criminal justice system and give people the kind of compassion and kindness that they need after something like that occurs. And it'll also allow us to collect a lot of data, because we think a lot more reports will be able to come in. And another key piece that I also wanted to mention is that we've also noticed that a lot of different religious institutions and nonprofits have been absorbing many, many new costs related to security in this heightened climate. And we wanted to do more to ensure that the state and not only the federal government has grants available to people that maybe want to, install a fence outside of their building, or, different physical security upgrades that they might need. So we established a nonprofit security grant system through the state. We have secured $500,000 and I think $1.5 million moving forward. So that's something that we've seen, well over 100 different nonprofit institutions from Washington apply for, and it was a new grant just during a 1-year period. So we know that it is a time of heightened risk for people, and we want to do more to provide more immediate services and support. I just want to thank you so much for being so attentive and thoughtful, and just sharing your beautiful space with me. And I'm happy to answer any questions or curiosity you might have, and you're welcome to ask in front of everybody, or I'll be here after as well. But I just want to thank you so much for your partnership, and look forward to continuing to find ways to work together and celebrate each other's communities. So thank you.
Okay, we have some time for some questions. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I think historically what we've seen, in many different countries in many different decades is, unfortunately, when you have a rise of populism and you unfortunately have a rise of nationalism, And you have threats to democracy that really threaten the fabric of society, the way that we interact with each other, the respect that we have for each other. That directly impacts marginalized communities and marginalized people. And I also think another unique factor that we're seeing maybe this time around that maybe wasn't present decades ago is the connection with technology and social media, the ability for conspiracy theories and disinformation and misinformation to grow in leaps and bounds, and also the breakdown in civil discourse. So I think those kinds of trends are connecting and intersecting in ways that are really troubling. But one thing at ADL that we try to use as a teaching tool to kind of help people understand the different levels that we see in society when it comes to threats is this thing called a pyramid of hate, because it's a pyramid and it looks like a triangle. And what we see at the bottom levels are the more innocuous forms of bias, like maybe a joke that somebody makes at the water cooler on a playground. But over time, that pyramid can become more severe, and the attitudes become more hardened, and the kind of actions become more aggressive and systemic and grow and build over time. But we try to also encourage people and not depress people is that, like a pyramid, even though it can grow or worsen over time, and the tippy top is like the worst things that we're seeing in society, it can also be disarmed, because a pyramid is only allowed to exist because of the foundations at the bottom. So if you address those foundations and you don't allow, bias to fester in ways that become really dangerous, you're also not enabling some of the most threatening attitudes at the top. So it's kind of something that I like to remind myself about, because, we all have unconscious bias or implicit bias and ways that we categorize the world and stereotypes that we have from how we grew up and in our own families. But I think it's also a powerful reminder to us that we each also have the powerful to kind of disarm that pyramid. And if we're not actively working towards, maybe intervening when somebody makes, a comment that isn't okay, or if we see something, in our different worlds, that we have the ability to intervene and stop it. So I think it is a powerful reminder that it is a collective and personal duty as well to make sure that pyramid doesn't continue to rise. But I do think some of those big trends are unfortunately connecting in a dangerous, dangerous hurricane. Yeah. Yeah.
One of your interesting points was that the Jewish people have not benefited from gaining acceptance over time like other ethnic groups have. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts about that, why that is. And I'm kind of wondering if it has to do with our sort of nominal separation between church and state. That we have, for example, we have a Martin Luther King Day, and we have, I get Juneteenth off as a state employee. And we have an Asian American Pacific Islander month. But because there's kind of a taboo against institutions recognizing religion, we don't have anything comparable for religions.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think maybe to answer the second part of your question first, I think there were a couple of pieces of my presentation that might explain some of this. I mean, one is, even though sometimes something can be a global problem, we're also a very small people. So often we can maybe be the only Jewish person in a workplace or in a school or in a certain community, and we are quite a small minority. But I think you also raised some other really interesting issues that I think sometimes in American society, when we think about combating discrimination, we think sometimes about discrimination in a very race-based or forward way, which is really important because racism is, embedded in society and informs many or most of our social ills that we experience. But I think the Jewish people don't quite fit into that neat formula sometimes, maybe because many of us are white presenting, although not all of us. We might be viewed as a religious group, which might make people concerned about, doing something that looks like they're, infusing religion into the workplace or into a school or into a community. So I think there are a variety of factors that make us a little bit tricky to categorize. And at certain points of our history, we've been racialized, and in certain points of our history, we haven't, but I frequently hear from members of the Jewish community that anytime they have to fill out like a census or a demographic box, they never know where they fit, and they feel weird. You know, you can acknowledge maybe the color of your skin, but also your experience in life and your family's experience doesn't really fit into that box. So I think sometimes it's interesting because we're in a period of time where a lot of people, you know, are very race forward and race conscious with how they think of things, and rightly so. But at the same time, you know, we're also told that race is a construct, and I do think a lot of times the ways that we categorize different communities are kind of constructs as well. So I think it's something that we've really struggled with in terms of making anti-Semitism more at the forefront of how we combat prejudice, because it's hard for people to understand the complexity and nuances of the Jewish people and what anti-Semitism looks like. So I hope that kind of maybe helps affirm some of the, you know, questions or curiosities that you have. But I think, you know, the way that I was talking about before in terms how anti-Semitism functions in different forms of prejudice, because it essentially is a conspiracy theory, you could imagine how that's weaponized or utilized throughout different points of history to blame, to stereotype, to scapegoat in very convenient ways for governments or different demographic groups. So I think that also has been a real pain point for our community, that the way that we've been, you know, targeted or discriminated against has often functioned differently than other forms of prejudice, and has often been, you know, weaponized in different political systems historically. Yeah, not a great answer, because it's hard. You know, sometimes it just doesn't fit neatly into that box, and it's something that we struggle with. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to thank you very much for your speech today. And I think one of the things that we've been trying to do here, and we're starting back up, is our community speaker series again, because one of the things that I think about is, especially with all the new immigrants coming into America, is us understanding who these people are, you know, and what, I mean, they're human beings, okay, number one. But, you know, everybody starts categorizing people, and to me, one of the things, and I'm not sure how we do it, is it's about learning about each other, you know, in a safe setting, not antagonistically. And I'm wondering if, you know, like you say, you're a small people, we're a small people, everybody's in their own little silo.
Yeah.
As a group, my understanding is that the minorities in the next 10 years is going to flip. It's going to become, you know, the white people are going to become the minority. And I think that's part of the issue with the fear. It's a fear thing that they don't want to be the minority. We're all used to being minorities. So how do we deal with this? And do you have any suggestions on how we can bring groups of people together? We've talked about it here, you know, like over food, or just, you know, round tables with people of different ethnic backgrounds, different faiths. I mean, you know, some of that all kind of gets put together, and I'm not sure, you know, I guess we have to start in a small way, but I always worry about us attacking new groups of people that are coming in. And I think of it as we're all immigrants.
Yeah.
When people say, go back home, it's like, this is my home, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the hardest parts of creating cross-community connections is that we're all just really busy. And sometimes, I think I've found this in my work too, like it takes a lot of really concrete effort, I think, to focus on some of the bigger picture things. Like, how do you bring big communities together, you know, in a big event or a big program, or create ongoing dialogue or conversation? And I think sometimes it does take a lot of extra work, but it's also really meaningful and really fulfilling when done well. So I would encourage you to continue the journey of, I mean, even just having a guest speaker at your service. I was thinking, wow, that'd be so nice if I could do that at our service, like maybe for our younger folks for Hebrew school, or maybe at our bigger, you know, services for Shabbat or something like that. So I think that's actually a really wonderful model, and maybe we can talk after about ways that we can, you know, continue to do that. But I would also just say that sometimes it doesn't have to be something big to be impactful. It could also be small, like honestly just picking up a book, or listening to a podcast, or doing some reading to better educate yourself about, you know, a different community, a different group, showing up, maybe learning more, inquiring about how you can connect and learn. So I think sometimes it can be big, like bigger community events and programs that are more formal like this. but also sometimes I think it's just our personal learning journey and being committed to being open-minded and making the effort to do so, which I feel like is sometimes the hardest part in all of it. Like even as nonprofits that really thrive off of cross-community connections, sometimes the work can feel so great that this is like the extra luxury. It's the dessert that we always get when we put in the work, and we acknowledge it's a lot of work, but it's really rewarding. And the Asian Jewish Initiative has been one of the most rewarding pieces of work that we've done in my time at ADL over 6 years. And seeing people come together that were at first a little quiet, and it was kind of awkward, and trying to kind of figure out like everybody's organizations and what they do and their personalities and how much time they want to put in. And over time, like it's become this thing where people are chatty and excited to see each other, and they have lots of updates to share and ways they're working together. So it takes kind of time to like sow those seeds of friendship before you can also get to the work. And I think that's something important too, is just building those personal connections and bonds before you talk about the heavy things is also really nice to do as well. So we're showing up for people in authentic ways where we really know their community, and we're not just, hopping on the latest train. So I think that's another piece of it that I've learned as well for the work, is trying to connect with people about family or their hobbies, about what they love to do, what inspires them about their community, their work, and maybe down the line, having harder conversations to learn about the real issues is something for me that's been really helpful.
Roger.
Love all the questions. Yes.
First, two-part question. First of all, does the ADL speak for the Jewish people in America?
No, because the joke is that if you have one Jewish person, you have like 5 opinions. So I don't think our goal is necessarily to speak for the Jewish people or the Jewish people of the United States. I think it's to be an organization that was founded by the Jewish community and centered in the Jewish community that educates about anti-Semitism and intolerance. So we are certainly a very prolifically opinionated people with diverse perspectives and practices. Yeah.
The reason I ask is because I think the ADL is the one organization that I think most Americans that aren't Jewish identify Jewish people.
Yeah.
The second part is, does the ADL have an official position on how aggressive or how lenient or whatever you want to call it Israel should be with the Palestinians during this war? I know that this, for the first time, I don't recall this ever happening before, at least locally here. There seems to be more pro-Palestinian demonstrations and support than I've ever seen before against Israel. I'm just surprised.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not actually that surprised, because I do feel like I don't know if it's in the post-George Floyd world or just in the world we live in, the notion of kind of like globalized injustice and that we are all connected as social justice activists has been a notion that's really been growing in recent years. And there's been this concept that, one marginalized group, is intersectionally connected to another. So in some ways, I don't know if I'm so surprised, because we've also been seeing the highest levels of anti-Semitic incidents over time, that these ideas have unfortunately morphed and grown. And it's really hard for us as professionals, because you can't disentangle the two ideas. But I think what I'll say about that, and maybe it can help you kind of digest the landscape, or at least how we present things a little bit more, is that it's a really hard time for the Jewish community, because many, if not most Jewish people have some connection with the land of Israel, with family, with friends, with perhaps traveling, or like even for me, just going to a place for the first time where I've actually felt a sense of belonging in my life. Like everyone can pronounce my name. I hear Hebrew, on the streets, which is something I've learned as a kid, but it's not like, you walk into the United States and swaths of people are speaking Hebrew. You just feel a sense of belonging and inclusion, and it was something that I kind of felt for the first time there, and I think that many people feel. But I also think we're a people with like very, despite a unique connection to that place where we originated from, very differing political beliefs and opinions, and it's hard because this is an issue that's so predominant in the news, and there are so many opinions about this war and what's happening, and its connection with anti-Semitism is undeniable. So it's hard for us to go into a room and not address it. But I think the other hard part of it is also intergenerationally in the Jewish community. It's caused so much strife with people who have very different feelings about Israel and its importance to the Jewish people, and the current war today, and if it's what is right or what is wrong. And so I think it's kind of been interesting to see those two paths emerge right now, with it being a huge societal focus at the moment, which it rightly should be, and at the same time, even within the Jewish community, having so many people with differing opinions and feelings, even with their own families. And I've been asked by so many people how to deal with these issues among different generations. And there's some really interesting podcasts, one particularly by Ezra Klein, that talks about how the American experience with Israel is so different generationally, depending on if you were alive during the formation after World War II, you kind of 2 decades as Israel fought wars with its neighbors, or today, is in a much better place of security and has been, involved in, challenging conflict with its Palestinian neighbors. So I think also generationally as American public, there's a lot to really learn and understand about how we view the world differently based on our own, age group or demographics. So I'm always happy to chat after, because I know it's a terribly complex and hard issue. And I think ADL also grapples too with how to balance with supporting democracy, supporting human rights, supporting the dignity of all people, while at the same time recognizing that this is a uniquely vulnerable time to be Jewish, and anti-Semitism is integrally connected to Israel and its ability to survive. So it's just such a hard time for our community. But I think the thing that I ask people is to just be gracious, be open-minded, be curious, and not to be so binary, and understand that there can be multiple truths in a situation. And when we're not binary thinkers, I think it opens us up to more complex understanding of the world. And also not to be scared. Like, I think a lot of people are really scared to reach out to their Jewish neighbors. They don't know what to say. They don't want to make a faux pas. But sometimes even just saying, I hope you're doing well. I'm thinking about you. I know this is a really heavy time for your community. I don't have all the answers, but I want to let you know that we're there for you, is a really nice place to start. So it's a hard time. Sorry, you're like, before that long monologue.
So I don't know. I'm sitting here a little confused over, the interesting thing to me is talking about anti-Semitism.
I can take this.
Okay, I can too.
I
Yeah.
can take this. So I appreciate the question. And admittedly, I also work for ADL, and obviously I'm not Jewish. Nor am I don't identify. I'm Japanese American. I think that to that point, and I can answer this as a non-Jewish employee, is that ADL is actually for everyone, right? It's dual mission to self-definition of the Jewish people, but also to secure justice and fair treatment for everyone, right? Because that dual mission. And while Miri did focus on a lot of anti-Semitism today, that is not even that is a large chunk of what we do, but it's not all that we do. And I don't even walk away thinking that that's all we do, right? No, that's good. That's good. And I think the two things that I'll say about this is that anti-Semitism lives at the heart of a lot of other racism and bigotry that exists, right? It has a lot to do with the thing. So, and we can talk afterwards, and I don't want to get too far into it right now, but.
Yeah. Like a synagogue. Yeah.
So, thank you, Medea. I appreciate that. I think we have to wrap up.
Okay. Yeah.
So, two things, right, that I think kind of stick out for us, and we'll have like some coffee and tea afterwards. Is number one, I don't know how many of you have actually been to a synagogue, but a lot of times you walk through like metal detectors, armed security guards, all that stuff. And so, what can we do, number one, to help or be helpful in this moment, right, that the Jewish people are feeling out of strife? That's the last kind of thing that I'll have you kind of close with, and then we'll have our coffee over there. And I know there's questions out there, and we'll get to them maybe afterwards on a one-on-one basis. But Miri, if you could
I would just say reaching out to your Jewish friends and neighbors to learn, to support, to be a good ally is important. We're all dealing with a complex world, and none of the answers are simple, and none of the solutions are simple. But I also think making an ongoing effort to educate yourself about not only our community, but other communities and other immigrant or refugee or other, impacted communities in the Puget Sound is really, really important, and, part of our, community and societal obligation to each other to be able to be lifelong learners and grow. So I hope that, hopefully this is an impetus, and I'm always happy to give you some ideas. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Miri. One more thing. Sorry, we're going to do elder privilege here. Auntie Lily has a question.
I'm sure you're familiar with the book, Light One Candle. I think everybody here should get a copy of that Light One Candle.
Mm-hmm.
It puts a different perspective on things.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Well, Miri, thank you for being here today.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Thank
give
you
a
so
round of
much for
applause.
having me.
We're just so appreciative of the work that you do. We'll hope you stay a little bit longer for some coffee and snacks, but this is for you as a thank you. So thank you for being here. There's coffee and snacks in the back, and we will wrap it up here. Thank you.